Jamie Dimon is the CEO of America's largest and most successful bank, JPMorgan Chase. At the helm of a company active in over 60 countries worldwide, Dimon played a pivotal role in the global financial crisis of 2008 and again in 2023. The Economist's editor-in-chief, Zanny Minton Beddoes, sat down with him to get his take on the biggest financial and geopolitical challenges facing the world today.
Do you think the world is more dangerous than at any time in your lifetime?
Yes. And we haven't had something like this since World War II.
And to delve into his personal ambitions.
For a man who runs a very big, successful bank, you have a lot of ideas about public policy. Why don't you run for office? Jamie Dimon, thank you so much for joining The Economist. You were in China recently, and reportedly you said that the Sino-US relationship was the most complex since the Second World War, the geopolitics around that. Henry Kissinger, I had a long conversation with just a few weeks ago for his 100th birthday, and he said to us that he thought that we were on the path to great power confrontation.
Yeah. I mean, we should be talking to the Chinese and they should be talking to us. I tell people when you go there, the first thing should be, let's talk about your family. Then the next meeting, maybe let's talk about the hopes and aspirations for your country. And then the third meeting is, we're going to explain to you what we're worried about. Let's have a real conversation. This is going to take real tough negotiations to get it right. I'm a firm believer, if you opened up our borders, billions of people would move here. You know, if you opened up our markets, trillions of dollars would move here. It's not true they'd move to other parts of the world. So we should be looking at our own flaws and not always blaming other people. The Chinese are not 10 feet tall. They import 10 million barrels of oil a day. They don't have enough food. We have all the food, war, and energy we want. Our GDP per person is $80,000. Theirs is 15. Our military is the best in the world. You know, and maybe they're caught up in a couple of areas, but you know, the notion that somehow America has to be that afraid of China, we don't. On the other hand, looking back 15 years, we all made a mistake. We should have been thinking this national security, unfair competition, and not just hoping it all ends up okay. They've been doing that by 10 or 15 years. If you look at how they think about supply chains, industries they want to dominate, they've been quite blunt about it, and which I understand. They're trying to do a good job for their own country.
I was in Beijing a couple of months ago. You know, the view in Beijing is that the US wants to keep China down. Yeah. And the view in Washington is that China is a aggressive authoritarian regime that wants to create a world order that's kind of antithetical to democracies. I think there's an element of truth to both of those, and that's the problem, isn't it?
Our goal should be to lift up America, do a great job, keep our Western alliances together, both for the military, i.e. Ukraine, and to counter some of the bad guys out there. But economically, we need an economic comprehensive strategy too. That's trade, investment, even like the IRA Act, which again, I support most of it. It wasn't done really thoughtfully with our allies, who looked at that and said, that is the most anti-European thing we've ever done. And sometimes they complain too much, but they're also partially right. And so to me, we got to keep that all together, and we can be tough and mature. And we don't have to hold them down. We have to just protect ourselves. And there's a big difference between the two.
If one side thinks the other is trying to keep them down, and frankly, there is evidence for that, right? I mean, what are these export controls on advanced semiconductors? They're designed to ensure that China stays far behind the US in the cutting-edge technologies of the 21st century.
I think if it related to national security, i.e. supersonic missiles, I understand why we do it. If it relates to holding back the Chinese people, I understand why we shouldn't do it. So I know I've had a couple of conversations with people. Are you talking about the 2 nanos, the 4 nanos, the 6 nanos? Where is it being used in military equipment? Where is it not being used? No country would give away their best military equipment to another country that they might go to war with. So that would be okay. It's just that's this narrow garden thing we have to be very careful about. And like I said, I don't think we've ever done this before. So I think we're all struggling to figure out what we actually mean by that. I think the government is, businesses are, but going and talking to each other is the first way to say what really matters, what's important, what protects the United States.
What are the geopolitical events, other than China, which we've talked about, that worry you most, or risks?
In 1918, we said never again. In 1945, we said never again. And on February 24th, 2022, you had 300,000 Russian troops with thousands of tanks and aircraft under a nuclear threat umbrella blackmail, invade a free and democratic European nation. This is as serious as you can find. Now, I think it had all the opposite effects that Putin wanted, which is NATO coming closer together, the Democrats, the Republicans becoming united, Sweden and Finland hopefully joining the NATO, et cetera. But this is still very serious. And the other big effect is it's affecting every major relationship in the world between the Western world, the autocratic world, Iran, North Korea, all of that, including trade, investment, anything related to security. So I think this is a very serious issue.
Do you think the world is more dangerous than at any time in your lifetime?
Yes. I think it's hard to argue that it's not. Again, we haven't had something like this since World War II.
I spoke to Jamie Dimon for over 45 minutes on subjects ranging from the health of the economy and the future path of interest rates to leadership and indeed why he says he won't run for president. Subscribers to The Economist can view the full interview on our app or on our website. And if you're not already a subscriber, you can become one by clicking the link here. So that turns to the need for leadership. And since World War II, the US has been the global hegemon leader of the free world. But when you look at the US now, an unbelievably polarized country, the economy is doing well, but an incredibly politically polarized country. It looks like we're gearing up for another Trump-Biden rematch. Is US politics capable of that kind of leadership?
One of the beautiful things about democracy is we can argue, we can talk, we share information, people change their minds. If they don't like their leadership, they change their leadership. But I think it's very important to point out, it does need American leadership. I don't mean that as an arrogant American. I mean that there is no one else who can provide it. Economically, militarily, it's got to be done with allies. It can't be, we can't be our way or the highway when it comes to every little thing. It's got to be economic, diplomacy, development, finance. So I would love to see us do more of those things, and I think a lot of the government members do. So,
but is there really an appetite for that? I mean, if you look back at the sort of post-war period, there was a bipartisan support for American engagement, for American global leadership. Now, if you look, certainly at the Republican Party, there's a growing isolationist wing in that party, and it's not at all clear what a future President Donald Trump might do in terms of American leadership. If you're outside America, if you're, I live in London, we're worried about this.
I would worry about another Trump presidency too, by the way, but I think there's always been an isolation element. It took a lot to get us to World War I. It took a lot to get us to World War II. But I think if you go to Washington, D.C., when it comes to Ukraine, it's been pretty tight. Republicans and Democrats. So when it was needed, it was there. And I think the other thing we have to explain to the American public is we're doing it for America. So of course you have America first, meaning, can you imagine someone running for president saying America second? But we're doing this for America. If America gets isolated, if autocratic nations kind of cherry pick the world on security and food and economics and development finance, if the Chinese are all over Latin America, which they are, in Africa, and we're not there, that's a huge mistake for America. So the America should be doing this for itself. We have to explain to the American public why it's important.
I guess the reason I worry about that is that in both parties there's been movement away from that. There's a sense that America's old approach wasn't working. So the kind of thing that you are describing, I just don't see as much support for as
I think
there was.
a lot of people are just throwing a lot of stuff in there saying, American leadership and the economy and free enterprise and capitalism, it wasn't working. It was working. So I think that's a huge mistake, and that somehow we're confusing national security with all these other things. Like, I don't think it's a smart thing for America to be going around the world lecturing all these other countries about stuff. I'm more in the realpolitik camp, where these countries have their own interests. We should understand that. We may not like it. We may not like everything they do. They don't like everything we do. But I would focus on security and economic strategy. I'd focus on those things to keep the Western world together. But that does not mean there aren't flaws. We've done a particularly bad job in America taking care of our lower paid citizens, particularly in parts of rural America and the inner cities. That's a fact. We should just acknowledge that. What did we get wrong? Like, think of inner city high schools. What did we get wrong when it comes to healthcare? We've got things right, that we have some of the best in the world, pharma, doctors, science, hospitals. I'm a beneficiary of all of that. But we got things wrong. Too much obesity, too much drugs, too much, we got things wrong with jobs. We got things wrong. We should acknowledge those things without denigrating my country. Because I'm also against that somebody have to denigrate America because, we made mistakes. There is no nation on the planet who didn't make some terrible mistakes.
Let's talk about Bidenomics. The president has been out touting Bidenomics, yet his approval ratings on the economy are pretty crummy.
Yeah.
Do you think Bidenomics has been a success?
God, it's a tough question to answer. Look, I'm in favor for the first time in my life of some industrial policy for security reasons and for competitive reasons and stuff like that. It shouldn't be political, it should be purely economic or something like that. I think one of the things I think the American public looks at is our government competent and effective? Is it becoming too much Big Brother? And I think those are different questions than the IRA Act.
So how do you answer your first question?
And also the fiscal spending, $5 trillion of excess fiscal spending over 2 years, some to counter COVID, but some was far more in excess of that, is causing the inflation.
So how would Dimonomics be different from Bidenomics?
First of all, I'm a free enterprise person. I think markets do work. I think when we talk about the flaws of the markets, there have always been some flaws in the markets, but if that's being used to get rid of free enterprise, that's a mistake. The most important part of free enterprise isn't capital, it's people. The movement of people, the brain power of people, your ability to start and think and grow and move and things like that. And so I would have growth policies. You know, we haven't done a particularly good job in this country. To give you a number, we grew from the last 20 years something like 1.7% a year. It should have been 3%. You know, we should be criticizing ourselves. Why wasn't it 3%? I personally believe it's because we've done a terrible job in immigration, taxation, mortgages, affordable housing, healthcare. I think we grow 3%. 3% would mean the average American would have $15,000 more GDP per person this year. That's what we should have done. That would have paid for better safety nets. That would have paid for more military. It would have paid for more schooling, whatever you think, you know, we need to do more of.
But that list of things that you've laid out, it doesn't bear a huge amount of resemblance to the things that the administration is focusing on. I mean, Bidenomics, as you said, it's about industrial policy. It's about a bigger role for the state.
Yeah, I'd be careful about that. You know, and we all agree we need to do a better job in education. We should be making it cheaper, not more expensive. Kids should know if I graduate this certificate or this degree, I can get a job making $75,000 a year. We should do a better job at that. You know, we're doing work with the community colleges in New York to give kids certificates around cyber, data, program management, financial management, that gives them a job, a livelihood. And then, of course, jobs lead to dignity, better outcomes, better social outcomes, more mobility. I think in our society we forgot, you know, we make fun sometimes the burger flipper job. That first job is the first rung in the ladder.
It matters.
That brings dignity. You know, I would do things like expand the earned income tax credit, which is a little form of industrial policy. It's a negative income tax. I think it would help society dramatically to get more hands in the lower paid, who would probably spend that money to take care of their families and their neighborhoods, and like I said, better social outcomes.
So when I listen to you, I hear you talking like this. I think that for a man who runs a very big, successful bank, you have a lot of ideas about public policy. Why don't you run for office?
You know, I'm 67 years old. I think if you're going to...
That's young by the standards of presidential candidate.
Yeah, I think, I've never really believed I'm suited for it. And I also think if you're going to do that, you should practice. You know, you don't just say, oh, I'm going to run for office. You got to learn how to run for office. I think there may be common skills between a CEO in terms of administration, management, leadership, but also non-common ones. You know, you're dealing with a whole bunch of different issues and a bunch of different venues and stuff like that. So, you know, I think it's perfectly reasonable people think about it. I think it's very hard to do. And in fact, if you just look at history, it's almost impossible. You know,
well, except for Donald Trump.
But he is the exception, and that may be the exception for 100 years. But, you know, every other American president spent a lot of time in politics or was a respected general, basically. He is the exception. Remember, that was the third time he ran, kind of.
That's true. What about serving in an administration?
Maybe one day that'll be in the cards, but that's not in the cards right away. But I love my country, and you know, to me, my family comes first, but my country's right next. You know, JPMorgan's down here. JPMorgan is my best contribution that I can do to, you know, like we have 300,000 employees. We take care of them well. We give them opportunity. We bank the World Bank, the IMF. We bank Ukraine. We bank Poland. We bank cities, schools, states, hospitals. I'm very proud of what we do. We help our employees. We help 5 million small businesses. It's unbelievable. That's my contribution.
Is there ever a tension between what's good for your country and what's good for JPMorgan?
Yeah, but I would always pick what's good for the country. And I think we need, I think business also, you know, I criticize government sometimes. I would also criticize business where, you know, they go to Washington, D.C. and it's always feeding at the trough. We have tax breaks for sugar and cotton. Why? We have carried interest. Why? You know, people going down there and just fighting for own little, I think it's a mistake. if business leaders said we can grow the economy faster with good policy, that would be far better for their business than just getting a little tax break down there.
I think you said a decade ago that you were barely a Democrat, and I think in 2019 you said your brain was probably more Republican, but your heart was Democrat. Which party are you closer to?
I don't know. I'm still in the same place. I think we should be taking care of our citizens. Like I said, we haven't done a particularly good job for the bottom 20% or something like that, and I want to do a better job. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
But in the end, you have to put a tick in a box. I'm not expecting you to tell me where you put your tick in a box, but I'll put it this way, which party has changed more and which party do you worry about its direction?
No, but then you're making parties binary, they're not. So look, I'm highly critical of the parties too sometimes. When I go down to Washington, I call them the wing nuts. Yes, they're there, but there are a lot of very smart people in both parties who I know and respect that really want to get things right. And I try to focus on that.
Jamie Dimon, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read more of our business coverage, please click the link. And don't forget to subscribe.